Carla. Can't wait to hear your message. Thank you.
Here he comes. Hi, everybody. My name is Carla and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date, thank you, is September 25th, 1987. My home group is a shoulder-to-shoulder online workshop. Tuesday night, we have a big book and 12 and 12 step study. Wednesday night is a history and tradition study, and now we're working on the service manual combined with the concepts, and I love those people. And I've heard a lot this weekend about those people. And until you became these people, my people, you were those people. And thank you. And just like Karen, when Karen came down off the stage, having heard that about her friend, there were two other women that made us these people that were there when she came down, ready to hold us up, ready to hold each other up. And I didn't even know I needed that. I never knew I'd like that, anything like that. So Tim told me to talk really loud, like scream into the mic almost, because that's how this mic works. And I'm so glad I've had practice, because my husband and I are kind of going deaf. And so we talk like this a lot around the house. And before I get too far into this, I want to thank Karen for the invitation, Karen and the committee for the invitation, and for all of you who have put this thing together. This is no easy feat. I know it. Thank you all. Every bit helps. And, the 12th tradition is well in action here. We get the celebration here. We show up and have the celebration, but all year long these people have been meeting together and trying to love each other and, have business meetings and discussions. I know it. I can imagine, because we have them at home too, So thank you for that. And I love the 12th tradition, and the best way I ever heard it put was the secretary of one of my old home groups. He said, "Yep, I'm leaving. I'm giving up I'm rotating out a secretary today. One day secretary, next day light flicker. That's how it goes, One day toilet paper bringer, the next day, speaker." So that's what we do. So I was telling you, my husband Doug sends love. A lot of you know him, and he decided at the last minute not to come. COPD lives with us now, and so we adjust. We don't want to whine or cry or make it hard on each other. So we just accept and kind of go along. And I try not to get in the way of that. I let him decide what he decides. But so he sends his love, and like I said, we're both kind of hard of hearing now. And if you do happen to be around us, and you hear us talking at this volume, which you often quite will, we're just trying to help each other hear. That's all. We're not mad. So, I don't know why I'm an alcoholic. I used to think it was circumstance. I want to welcome you if you're new, and you're still wondering, trying to figure out if this is the place. Because I know I knew I was sick when I got here. I just wasn't sure if you were it, if you were the place. And I used to think it was circumstance. I would have told you that I'm an alcoholic because of my crazy, dark, dramatic, violent, perverted family. If you had my family, you'd drink too. And then I met people like my husband, who a lot of you know. And that guy lived a charmed childhood. That guy, you should see his family. They grew up loving each other and singing together. And, when challenges happened in their family, as they often do, they'd support each other through it. It's just, after a family event, I still get a bit of a sugar headache, coming away from it, because it's just so sweet, loved and needed and wanted. But in the end, he sits right next to me in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? Because alcohol did exactly for and to him what it did for and to me. And so here we are. And it wasn't like I didn't believe in God. It wasn't like I didn't have a connection when I was a small child. I felt that all, that everything, that connection with a capital C to that thing, this life's longing for itself, or whatever you want to call it. I felt that. I had that at times. But when alcohol came along, it was just so much quicker than saying a prayer. I could take a drink and I felt better right away. Why try to figure out what God's will is? I'm good now. And so I let it start doing the work. It did the work for me. It felt like it did. God, it became my growing up muscle, and it became my spirituality, and it became the thing that made me feel buffered from you, and the thing that made me feel connected to you all at the same time. Why wouldn't I drink that? It felt like it worked for me. I say it felt like it anymore because, when I look back, I don't remember anybody ever telling anybody, give her another drink, it works for her. But it felt like it did. So when I got sober, it was all waiting for me. All the work I never did, all the counterfeit, all of it was waiting for me. But the good news is there's hope. The good news is we catch up. The good news is if I'm willing to take a certain simple attitude, take a few simple steps, take a few simple actions, I'm going to get better. I'm not walking around 38 years sober in paper slippers anymore. So I started drinking young. My husband and I sometimes try to figure out, maybe did we run it? We were out in the same area in Southern California when we were out there in active alcoholism. And he's a musician and an actor and stuff. And the closest we could get to thinking maybe we had crossed paths was at one time he was playing music in the clubs on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and I was working Sunset Boulevard. And but we're not sure. So, and I left home at an early age. There was a lot going on in my house that I didn't know how to handle anymore. And I'm the oldest of 4 children, and I still believe it was for me to leave. I come from a family where my baby sister committed suicide at the age of 17. My baby brother died of alcoholism and drug addiction when he was 30, and my last remaining sibling lives in Wisconsin, and when she's not drinking, she's on the Vicodin maintenance diet. And I got lucky. I took a few simple actions. People have been trying to help me for a long, long time, so I had to take the walk. But I was lucky to get here. So I was out there. I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, from home into the streets, and I ended up in San Francisco learning how to turn tricks at the age of 14 to make a living. And I have to tell you, it was not my plan. I have nothing against the profession at all. If you're a grown adult and you've made those decisions and it's working for you, that's great. It just wasn't me. It just wasn't, and I was 14. So and soon after that, I started spending time in the institutions that so many of us know so well. A mental hospital for a year, and a rehab at the state hospital, and a girls' home. And I never went out the front door of any of those places. Juvenile hall in between. And in the nut house, I know some of you know, the Thorazine shuffle and the Meloril and the Valium and Dowmine sleepers. And I suppose they were concerned I wouldn't sleep. And I became intimately familiar with 5-point restraints, and that's what I looked like at 15. And I ran away from that girls' home at the very end. I hooked up with a boyfriend that I met in rehab. I know some of you identify with that. Rehab is where they keep a lot of the partners. And I got me one, and we headed off into happy destiny. And we really loved the idea of peace and love. We just couldn't stop knocking the heck out of each other really long enough to implement the principles fully of peace and love. So we ended up pitching a tent in the mountains in southern Oregon, lived there till the rains came, and then we met a guy in town who invited us to come up and live on top of his mountain. And it was government land, and there was this old mining claim with this old log cabin that had no roof, so we threw a plastic tarp over the top and called it a skylight, and then the baby came. And our friend lived up the hill in the plastic tent. We called him our spiritual advisor, and we were drinking homemade wine and moonshine because it was organic and much better for you, and still no change. And I thought having this little girl was going to change the way I drank, and we all know that alcoholism just doesn't care who you love. It doesn't. By that time, I was getting my clothes and shoes and the necessities of life out of a box behind a store in town, and I thought I was going to be a better parent than the ones I had. I was delusional. My daughter got in the way of one of our fights when she was about 10 months old, so I had to take her up the road where it's got to be better somewhere else. This hope is just up the road. I was sure if I kept moving that any minute now, life was going to click. It was going to be okay. I ended up down in Southern California. My first legitimate work was in the bar business. I know you know. It never occurred to me not to drink on the job. Why else would you have that job? It just seemed to me to be cosmically efficient. So I had gotten this really great job in Hollywood. I lived in Covina, about 25 miles away, and great job. The bartenders there were retiring out of there, having worked, for several years. So it was a great place, great boss, great people. I'm the common denominator. My daughter was almost 4 years old then, and every afternoon I'd kiss her goodbye and I'd take off for the bar in Hollywood, and I'd get thirsty about halfway there. You know how we do, stop at the bar on the way to the bar and have the couple of shots of Cuervo and a couple of Bud Backs, 2 drinks in alcoholic math. And drink those drinks down and head off and go do my job till the wee hours of the morning and crawl home and start over again. And I did that for months until one afternoon I kissed my girl goodbye and I took off and got thirsty on the way, stopped at the bar on the way to the bar and had those same drinks. And to this day, I don't know what was different on that day from the day before except for 24 hours, because I didn't hate the job I was going to, and I didn't love my daughter any less on that day than I love her today. But I sat on the bar stool that day and I drank those drinks, and this time I couldn't stop. This time the knowledge that I needed to get up and go to a job I really liked going to so I could pay the bills and take care of the person that I would have told you was the most important person in the world. There was no drama or trauma going on that day. I was happy, but I started to drink. And gradually things get worse. It just wasn't enough to overcome the phenomenon of craving that happens once I start to drink. And the knowledge that my little girl was waiting at home for me so that when I got home in the wee hours of the morning, we could play for a little while until time to get up, and then play for a little while and let me go back to work, just wasn't enough to overcome the phenomenon of craving that happens once I start to drink. And if Just Don't Drink would have worked, you'd have a different speaker today, that's for sure. Because by that time, the handcuffs of alcoholism had neatly wrapped themselves around me, and I couldn't stop. I sat on that bar stool and I lost the kid and I lost the job in one fell swoop, or traded them away, whatever you want to call it, but they were gone. And I lived off the kindness of strangers there in that little area for about, a few months. And I love that beautiful little understatement that Bill writes that we all have our own version of, where he says, gradually things got worse. We know what that is. And I ended up marrying my drinking partner right about the time we should have split up. And we moved in together. And again, thinking my circumstances, if I just put it all back together, if I just get it right, move indoors, And I don't know what it was, when I was new, we feel we got that, we know we're sick. And I got here and I said it too, I never wanted to drink like a normal person. I never wanted to have just 2 drinks. But what about all that stuff in chapter 3? All those times. Why can't I just have a couple of drinks and go finish my shift? Why can't I have a couple of drinks and do my laundry? Why can't I have a couple of drinks and not walk away from my daughter for 4.5 years? Why can I not have and I tried and tried and tried to be able to manage that relationship with alcohol. My husband and I used to settle our arguments with a shotgun. Whoever got to the gun first won. That's how we did it. And it was dangerous and chaotic and frightening. And when I finally got my daughter back after she was 8.5 years old when I got her, I didn't get sober till she was almost 10. I had one job when I got her back, one job during the week, and that was to get in the car 5 days a week and go pick her up from school. That's all I had to do. 10-minute drive each way, get in the car and go pick her up. And most days I made it. But on this particular afternoon, I got in the car and I headed on over to go get her. And on my way over there, I got thirsty. And I know those are 3 words that send chills down the spine of any alcoholic who knows what it's like not to have any kind of defense whatsoever against that thought of the first drink. So I pull into the driveway of the bar. I walk into the bar and I order it up. And I start to drink that drink, and I think I've got 45 minutes. I'm going to have that drink, and then I'm going to go get her. I'm going to have this one. But really, I probably have time for 2. So I'm going to have 2, and then I'm going to go get her. I'm going to have 3 at the most. I'm going to have 3, and then I'm going to go get her. Somebody lines up the bar with empty shot glasses, and I can't turn down a free one, so I'm going to have 4, and then I'm going to go get her. And now it's 5 and 6, and now I'm late, and I'm drunk. And I can't let it happen again. And I slide off the bar stool, and I get into the car, and I drive over to the school, and I have to go into the front office because that's where they keep the kids whose parents can't get there in time. And the best defense is an offense. So when I walk in, I'm mad at the staff because I'm late. And as I get ready to walk across the office to give the receptionist hell about it, I trip over my own feet and I go rolling across the floor of the office where my daughter attends school. And as I went rolling across the floor, I caught a glimpse of my daughter's face and the look in her eye as she watched her mother roll across the floor of the office where she attends school. And I felt that sense of powerlessness, you know. Not the kind of powerlessness like, oh my God, I've got to do something. The kind of powerlessness like, oh my God, I am never going to change. I am always going to be like this. The best I could do was to get up, grab her hand, and get out to the car before somebody called the police like they were threatening to do. And that kind of thing happened over and over and over for the next little over a year. Till finally one Saturday afternoon, the cops are in the driveway again. Some of you know. The neighbors are peeking out the window again. The kid's standing in the corner in her mismatched clothes and her unkempt hair, and she got that look of fear in her eyes one more time. And none of us planned that. All of us thought, if we get up, everybody be cool, we'll all be all right. But one of us starts to drink and the other starts to drink, and he says this and I say that, and if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have done that. And off we go. And out comes the gun, and here we go. Finally, the cops left. They took the gun. The husband left for the last time, and it's me and the kid and the booze, and I still can't stop drinking. And here's where a hard drinker might take a look at their life and say something like, I can't do this anymore. And they stop. I've seen them do it in the bar. You know, they walk up, they say, give me a Diet Coke. I can't hang, you know, I can't control it. Give me a Diet Coke. And they play a couple games of Pac-Man. They get up out of the bar and they go somewhere else. It's strange. But me as an alcoholic that day, all I did, I was pull the booze closer to the couch so I didn't have to keep getting up to get another drink. Because I drank through my circumstances. I drank through homelessness. I drank through drug addiction, and I drank through the loss of my daughter, and I was getting ready to do it again. And my first sponsor told me if I wanted to effect a conscious contact with this power greater than myself, this power that I knew existed, this power that I once had an experience with and now had a vague memory of and a bare belief that I could ever make that contact, she said, why don't you start by counting the coincidences that happen in your life? You know, those situations that seem to fall together for the good of everyone without you having your hands on it. Coincidence. And I like that. I got that. And the first one I could count was that I had been living next door to a woman who had 5 years of sobriety, in Alcoholics Anonymous this whole time. That whole time I was there, about a year, she'd been living right next door, and she saw and heard that whole deal go down. And she came over a couple days later, and she walked over, she knocked on my door. She had those dorky little books, the 12 and 12 and the big book in her hand. And the longer I stay sober, the more I really, really appreciate how brave that really was, that she came over, having seen what she saw, marched over there with those books and knocked anyway. And I invited her in this time, and she came in and she sat down and she started telling me her story. And somewhere in there, I didn't know it till later, but the process of her practicing her 12th step became the seeds of my first. And that's how we do. And as she talked, I thought about the times I'd run into her on the premises earlier that year, out in the parking lot and in the laundry room, and she hadn't been drinking then either. And what really impressed me was it didn't seem to bother her that she wasn't drinking, and that got my attention. I didn't know how you did that. All I knew is when I had no booze and I had no steps or fellowship or God on my understanding, and I didn't even know about the first two, I felt like you stripped the coating off my wires, I was always sure I was going to OD on over-awareness, just. So I didn't know how her 12 little thinly veiled Sunday school sentences were going to have any effect on me in the face of what I'd become. They just seemed a little weak, And I didn't get sober that day. It was about a week and a half later. And I came home. My daughter was somewhere else that weekend, and I just didn't go back and buy any more booze. I stayed in that little apartment that night. I sat there. I had made a couple calls during the week, and there was, there's no treatment or anything like that open for me at that time. And what I think later is that people have been trying to help me all my life, and it was time just to put into action. And so I sat in that little apartment that weekend, and I shook it out, and I shook into Monday and into Tuesday, and thank goodness, I'm here. And by Tuesday night, I was stark raving sober. Tuesday afternoon, and I found myself standing on the front porch of my neighbor one more time, knocking on the door. And more than that, when she opened the door and I asked her what to do, when she told me to go up to that meeting and gave me the address and said, not that there'll be any big question, but tell them that you're new. And I found myself doing it. And that's how I know I'm willing. I'm either doing or not doing the thing that you told me to do or not do. That's how there's no argument. And I went up to that meeting, and I sat way back by the open door and the exit sign just in case. And I heard that beautiful pre-meeting chatter that we hear before all the meetings. People helping each other. You need a cup of coffee? You got a big book? You need a sponsor? You need a ride home? I was sitting way back in the back, and I heard a couple guys down the row talking to each other, and one of them said, "Hey, Joe, how's your lawn?" I said, "What?" I thought, oh my God, could my life ever be so elegant and simple as to be concerned about a lawn? My life felt so far removed from anything as perfect as that. And it felt like hope to me. It was like my Winchester Cathedral moment, really. And I stayed for the meeting, and after the meeting was over, the secretary asked me to read something, and I said yes. And I love these little seeds. Somebody read that passage earlier today. What seemed at first a flimsy reed proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. And 38 years of my sobriety is built on a foundation of flimsy reed after flimsy reed after flimsy reed. And I have to think about, our founders and that spark. And what lit on fire when that spark happened between the two of them. And also, before this is over, I want to remind us all. I want to let you know, if you're new, that is in each of us. We do not have to know somebody. Our big book says you may never come in contact with these people, but it's in us anyway. This is a path to that. No spectators here. But all of those little things, and the other thing is how people got sober before there was ever a book. That fast. Whenever I get too serious and we all sit around and we talk about what's said and what's written and the interpretation of the interpretation of the interpreter. You see everybody's brains flying out the top of their head. We get in our collective sections of the fellowship, and there didn't used to be a book. There just used to be principles. They're eternal. And it started kindness, courtesy, justice, love. One of those people reaching out their hand. I remember a lady named Mary Beth. The first time I walked into the meeting, I don't know which meeting it was, but I heard somebody say, "Hi, Carla." And I've had that happen over and over. Somebody comes up to me and says, when we were at that meeting and I was just coming back, you said hi to me. And I took the steps with my sponsor, and I always need to say I went out after 89 days. I drank one more time, and I had to finish that drunk. It was about 36 hours, and a lot can happen in 36 hours. I was lucky enough to get to come back. Not everybody is. But I got to learn a very important lesson in that day, and I carry it to today, and that is that I needed to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That getting uncomfortable anymore doesn't mean it's time for a drink. You gave me the great sufficient substitute, the more than sufficient substitute. I do this instead. You didn't say, yes, you have to stare down the drink and it will eventually go away. That would never happen. That would never happen. The drink would win every time. But you gave me the something else. You said, come over here. We do this. Do this instead. And I took these steps, and somewhere in the process of the first 9 steps, I realized after a couple of days, somewhere down the line, around 9 months sober, in the middle of making my amends to my family, that first round of amends, like most of you probably have experienced, somewhere along the line, it had been a few days. I realized it had been a few days since that thought to drink had come upon me. That obsession, that nattering lullaby of rationalization as to why I should take that drink. Nobody will know. And it was gone. It was expelled. You gave me something else to do, and the obsession is expelled. And it hasn't returned for me. I've heard people say that it has through still doing the work. They're still doing the work, and it has returned. But now they got trained feet. And I know that's got to be really uncomfortable, but I listen, I pay attention. There's never not, our book never stops talking about what the stakes are. In the 10th step, even with the promise of the obsession being removed and that we're free from that and that we've entered the realm of the Spirit, I will never be the warning I get from it at the end. Remember, we deal with alcohol. Alcohol is a subtle foe. I will never be so spiritually fit. I can take a drink of alcohol in any form at all, not brandy form or wine form or scotch. So, like I said, I took that, I made my amends to my family. That first round, the first initial statement of intention, accepting responsibility, all of those conversations, and then there was more work. And to this day, there's not one member of my family who stands in the doorway and says, no, please don't go to the meeting. They never do that. And we've grown. When my sister committed suicide, I was still out there in active alcoholism, and it took her all weekend to die. She lay on life support in a West Covina hospital, and and the family was there, and I would drink. I would sit in the van and drink, and then I'd go into the waiting room, and I just raked my mother across the coals and talked to her in a way a daughter should never talk to her mother, especially when her baby lay dying in the next room. And I don't know how you make amends for that. My sponsor said, my mom lived out of state, and she said, you got to call her. Start by calling her once a week and trying to find out how you might add to her life instead of take, and it starts from there. It started from there. Bring the kids up to see her, bring the grands up to see her, bring her down. And over time, when she finally passed away, we were clean and clear. And she never got to meet my husband, Doug, but my stepfather, the one that took, he was number 3. They had a wonderful relationship. And he called me after she passed, and he said, I know that you and Doug are headed for matrimony, and you know what I'd like to do. I know your mom gave you her rings, her wedding ring, when she left, and what I'd like to do is shine mine up and give it to Doug so the rings will be together again. And so those are the rings we wear, and so she gets to be with us. And sometimes the amends that we make could never, ever, ever touch the harm directly, could never, ever assuage that harm. That's a long time coming. I would never, I don't know. But what I have found, and it's been said, Paula said it Thursday and Benoit said it the other day, and that is that we cling to the thought that our dark past. When I share my mistakes, I really don't even have any hope to offer. I just tell them the mistakes I made. And my sponsees have shared back that it worked. And somehow that heals me. Somehow that heals me inside to just know, okay, they got to do it differently. So, and my daughter, she was mad. She was one mad 10-year-old, and she started running with a gang, and she was drinking and using, and she doesn't seem to have the allergy or any, but she went through a phase, man, I got to tell you. And even for young parents, even when you want to make amends to your kids, sometimes they don't make it easy. And most of all, I wanted to learn how to keep my hands off of her and do it differently than my parents had done it, and not control her in that old way. And I got to learn, but it wasn't easy. Even when we're willing, even when I want to change, it's not easy sometimes. And but it happened. It worked. And so I had to put her in treatment. She was there. I showed up when they asked me to. I stayed away when they asked me to. And, little by little, we did that sobriety cha-cha, And later on in her teen years, she was 16. She came home. She was pregnant. And I got to tell her, I'll be there for you. Whatever you decide, I'm here. So I got to be present at the birth of my first grandson. And then she had another boy a few years later. And both of those they're grown young men now. And the oldest is practicing law for a few years now. And the youngest is working and out just trying to decide what it is he wants to do with his life. And they're both really healthy, good kids. And she put herself through school, and just a few years ago we watched her collect her master's degree, and now she's the director of outpatient services at a psychiatric hospital, and so. And I like to say you're welcome for her training, but I don't know if she is who she is because or in spite of me, but I know that because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I get to be a privileged witness in her life and in the lives of anyone who wants to be in mine. And just last October, I got home from a trip, and she found out that she had an aggressive form of breast cancer, and I'm the one she called. And I can't get over it. Anybody who'll listen, I tell you, I'm the one she called. And I'm the one she felt safe enough to call. And she's 48 years old now, she's not a baby, but I'm the one. And I asked her, I said, don't you want to be with your friends? She's got these really great friends. She knows how to be a friend. She's got these great friends. And they're so much more fun than I think I am, with her. She said, no, Mom. She said, I want you to be there. You're low maintenance, and I don't have to take care of you. I'll take it. I'll take it. And so she's doing well. She had it was a rough year, but she's on the other side and she's healing, and and we got to hang out, and we made the best of it, and we laughed and shouted all the things at cancer that you shout, but it took a while, and it took a while. Perseverance and step by step and doing the footwork and leaving the results to this God, this life's longing for itself, this infinite power and love. This God. When I was 5 years sober, I came home from work one night and I woke up in the middle of the night. I went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to a man standing over my bed with a knife to my neck and his hand over my mouth. And he said, "Don't say a word or I'll cut your head off." And he took the telephone cord and he tied my hands behind my back and he raped me and he robbed me that night in my room. And I got to tell you, at 5 years sober, it was not what I expected. I'd been working 12 golden steps and, but, AA doesn't promise that we won't meet challenges in our lives. It just promises that if we do some things, we'll be able to walk through them sober. And cheerfully capitalize. That's the challenge, cheerfully. But it's true, And the thing about that is he was there for a few hours and I got away for a few minutes and after a few hours and we ended up in an altercation in the living room, and then he ended up going out the same window he came in, and it turned out I knew this guy. I'd watched him get sober 30 days before I did. I watched him get his life, his wife, his kids and everything back, and then I watched him join the church and leave AA, and when he went out, that's what happened. And what I chose to learn from that is that while the big book says to be quick to see where religious people are right, to make use of what they offer, Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where I learned the terms and conditions of my alcoholism. This is where I learned that I'm not one of those people who can go home after a Sunday sermon and have a glass of wine. I learned that here, and then I can go anywhere I want to and practice, develop that 11th step. But here, the best description of alcoholism I believe exists is on page 44. I'm a page quoter sometimes. I think everybody ought to read their own big book. But page 44 in that first paragraph wraps up the first 51 pages in there. If when you honestly want to find you can't quit entirely, or if when drinking have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. Boom. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness that only a spiritual experience will conquer. Solution. So, I don't ever want to forget what the stakes are. There was a trial that followed a few months later, and as part of the defense, they had a lot of the guys I'd known years before get up and testify as to who I used to be, kind of like a big public fifth step. And so we had to get a character witness for me, and by that time I was working at a big fancy investment firm downtown Los Angeles, a place I never would have walked in the front doors of years before. I would have had no business being there. But class by class and task by task, I'm showing up and walking alongside some pretty accomplished people, undetected. And the division head there volunteered to come and testify on my behalf as to my character. And they told him all about who I used to be, and he said, she shows up early and she stays late, and that's really what I know about her. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. He didn't have to be coached. He just got up and told the truth as he'd experienced it through me. And then it was my turn to testify, and I'm sitting in the witness stand, and my sponsor had already reminded me that I got to forgive this guy. And I know she's right. I know we're people who can't handle even seemingly justifiable resentments, but the guy had scared me. And fear. Fear is the driver. I become selfish when I'm afraid, self-seeking when I'm afraid, dishonest when I'm afraid. And I wrote inventories and I could, it was a process, and what kept me helped me keep my eye on the ball was a 7-step prayer. And I don't know why it was, but that helped me get to work and do the things I needed to do while all of this was going on. And so I'm sitting there and I'm in the witness stand and I look out and I see him and he's sitting at the defense table and I recognize that's a place where I used to sit. I've sat there before. If I were to go out, I could sit there again. And doesn't our inventory, page 67, tell us to take a look? Haven't I been so out of control that I've roared through the lives of others like that proverbial tornado? He's sick like me. Though I didn't like their symptoms and the way these disturb us, they like us. They like me. He like me. We don't have to go offense for offense. We can use a principle. Couldn't I again be so out of control that I roar through the lives of somebody like that proverbial tornado? Couldn't I? Or am I right now so full of self that somewhere in my life I'm filled with self and roaring through the life of another like that proverbial tornado? And it slows me down. And it gave a moment. It gave a window of forgiveness. The forgiveness came. The healing took a while longer for that. I was jumpy. I was angry. Some stuff had happened. It took a while. But the forgiveness came that day. And he was sentenced to 20 years and he did 12 and then he did 3. And I don't know if he's out of prison or not. I stopped getting letters a long time ago. And it just sort of worked its way into the ether. But I've gotten to talk to some guys who've been in prison about some of that stuff, when I do corrections work, and I let them ask me questions, and who knows? We do the footwork and we leave the results to God. And the detective who worked the case came to me after it was over and he said, I don't know who you were back then. I'm not even sure I want to know, but whatever it is you're doing now, keep doing it because it seems to be working. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. And we didn't know it at the time until the trial was over, but the judge had been a long recovered alcoholic. And the court reporter was the Al-Anon mother of a woman from my home group. So the 12-step fairies had thoroughly dusted the room before we got there. And and then life happens. My father and I didn't have to do that alone either if I didn't want to. You can walk through it alone, but people from my home group, sponsees, my sponsor, my father was at that trial. I didn't have to go through it alone. Then my father got sick and I'm the one he called. He got cancer and I'm the one he called, and I got to go over there and walk through that with him. And we've been progressively, he's 92 now, and just a couple of years ago he moved in with his girlfriend. Go daddy. They're like Weeble and Wobble, they're really cute. I've always had some form of meditation life, like my friend Adele always said, meditation is a real step. It sits right there between 10 and 12. It's not extra credit. And I've, my methods and the tools that have worked have changed over the years. The outline in the big book is wonderful, but it also says, hey, go out there and see. Go out there and check it out. Go develop this relationship with your God, with God, as you understand Him, as you get to develop a relationship. We don't need a mediator. We need messengers sometimes, but not mediators. Now I'm thinking, I hope that's the right word, but you know what I'm saying. So in the beginning, it started with a little reading, some prayer, all of that. For me, the unshakable foundation for living. I learned the process of the steps in the first 9. The first 9, that's what this is. And 10 says, keep doing that. It doesn't say do a little bit of each. It says, keep doing that. All of it. And then 11 says, grow it. Grow it. And it gives us, the outline, and And for me, it's fun and exploration. And then it shoots us right into 12. So I can share it. Sharing it not just with other alcoholics, but with my husband in the morning and the neighbors and the Vaughn's clerk and the bank teller and anybody I might run across, And I sit in the morning, not so I'll have colors shooting out my ears, although, you never know. But it settles me down and wakes me up so that I can be in the moment and ready. And I've done all kinds of meditation, books and getting all kinds of points of views and I've always had to have a physical aspect to it too, like there's been I learned how to work out. I'd never been in a gym before, learned how to work out, and then I learned to rollerblade and, out by the beach, and I'd watch the dolphins from the strand, and, rollerblading is very zen. If you've done it, it's like shh, 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 shh. The curb, you approach the curb, you don't argue with the curb, it exists. So you lift your leg and keep going. And then surfing, or in my case, falling. It was falling, and always had to have a physical aspect. And when I got hurt surfing, I started to learn to dance. I found myself in a Arthur Murray dance studio getting a free rumba lesson. And now, right about this time, I need to tell you, I was about 17 years sober, or something like that. Somewhere in there. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but life had kind of gotten a little bit hard. And even though I was taking the steps and doing the work as best I could, I was getting a little bit, like perfectionistic. And were you ever one of those people that put that on your resume? What's your biggest fault? I'm a perfectionist. I'm too much of a perfectionist. Well, and I had sponsees and, like they were like, I don't want to call her, you call her. I love her, but I don't want you call her. I couldn't be perfect, but maybe you should. So I was getting a little bit, I needed this release. I had these things, this healing that needed to take place, and inventory wasn't doing it. Sometimes it takes something else. It takes that's something else with the capital S-E. And I was in this rumba lesson. And you can't be stiff and brittle in a rumba lesson. You know that. You got to get a wiggle on to do the rumba. And we're in the middle of this lesson, and the teacher stops and he says, "Oh, no, Carla. Do not try to dance like a good girl. I don't think they will believe you anyway." And that's a true story. But what I got to learn and what was reminded of in dance is that when I'm not worried about the step I'm about to take, or not upset about the step I just took, and I stand in frame and I'm ready to be guided through the next pattern, I never know what it is until we're finished. And that's my experience with this power greater than myself that I'll never be able to explain. I certainly have gotten to experience. I heard this in Texas once and I just loved it. I've had many a burning bush and 1,000 smoking twigs, to help me along my way. And there's a lady named Paula Darcy who says that God comes to us disguised as our lives. And I've had a spiritual awakening sufficient to bring about this human experience. Because see, I'm okay with the infinite. I need to know how to be with you. Kindness, courtesy, justice, and love. Can I practice that? God answers questions I don't ask out loud, and does it through you. So if I keep showing up, do my best. Sometimes my 150% looks like 60 to you, but that's all right. It's got to be okay. God knows my heart. And before I sit down, I want to thank my beautiful hosts. Dolly picked me up from the airport because Amber was going to school, because that's what we do. She's working and going to school, and she's going to be a registered nurse and help people in a so much bigger way. This is it. The impetus of alcoholism brought me to the portal, Alcoholics Anonymous, that brings us back out into the world at large. We don't stay stuck in, tethered to. We're tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous, and in that way, I get to rejoin the world. And I want to thank you for my life.